The famous pre-American Civil War haunting of the Bell Witch involved poltergeist phenomena and spectral creatures, and according to legend, tormented one man to death. The haunting excited the curiosity of many people, including General Andrew Jackson. The story exists in several versions, 3 of which are presented here. The first is probably closest to the true anecdote, as it allegedly is based on the diary of one of the Bell's sons, Richard Williams Bell. The third version has a modern sequel. The different versions demonstrate how stories change in retelling. Legend number 1. John Bell was a prosperous farmer who owned 1,000 acres near Adams, Tennessee. He had a beautiful wife, Lucy, and 8 children. They were all devout Baptists and model citizens. In 1817, their lives inexplicably were turned upside down. The first signs were spectral creatures witnessed by Bell. One was a large, dog-like thing that vanished when Bell fired upon it with a shotgun. The other was a large, turkey-like bird. Following the appearances of the creatures, the home was plagued with knockings, rappings, and scrapings on the outside doors and windows. Sounds that resembled giant rats gnawing the bedposts and giant dogs clawing the floor were heard. These phenomena went on for about a year, and then covers began to be pulled off beds and invisible hands slapped faces and pulled hair. Particularly tormented was the Bell's 12-year-old daughter Betsy, who was slapped, pinched, and bruised and stuck with pins. Betsy was so afflicted that at first the family suspected her of perpetrating a trick on everyone else. At first, Bell was determined to keep the haunting a secret, but it became intolerable for the family. Bell at last confided in a neighbor, James Johnson, who discovered the offending spirit seemed to be intelligent, for it would temporarily desist when beseeched in the name of the Lord. Johnson advised forming an investigatory committee. With that, word went out, and the Bell home became the object of great curiosity. The spirit began to whistle and then to speak. It gave various identities. It said it was a spirit from everywhere, heaven, hell, the earth. I'm in the air and houses, any place, at any time. I have been created for millions of years. That is all I will tell you. On another occasion, it said it was the spirit of a person who had been buried in the woods nearby and whose grave had been disturbed. The bones had been scattered about, and a tooth was under the Bell's house. The spirit was looking for the tooth. The Bells searched, but no tooth was found. On another occasion, the spirit said it was the ghost of an immigrant who had died and left a hidden fortune. It had returned to reveal to Betsy the location of the money. The spirit gave a location, and the Bell boys dug for hours without finding a thing. That night, the spirit laughed over the joke. The townspeople came to think of the spirit as a witch. The spirit agreed, saying, "I am nothing more or less than old Kate Batts' witch, and I am determined to haunt and torment old Jack Bell as long as he lives." Kate Batts was a hefty local woman married to an invalid. She had once been dissatisfied with business dealings with Bell and had threatened to get even. She was still alive. From then on, the spirit was called Kate. Kate made almost daily appearances at the Bell home and visited everyone else in Robertson County as well, abusing them with her caustic tongue. She made predictions about the future, including the Civil War and the 2 world wars of the 20th century. But her primary purpose was to torment old Jack, as she called Bell, and to torment Betsy in order to dissuade her from marrying a young man named Josh Gardner. Kate did not disturb Lucy Bell, nor Betsy's favorite little brother John Jr. Kate grew so famous that General Andrew Jackson decided to visit and bring along a witch layer, a professional exorcist. Just outside the Bell farm, however, the Jackson carriage suddenly stopped and the wheels refused to budge. Kate's voice then manifested, promising to appear that night in the home. The carriage became unstuck. Later in the evening, Kate manifested with phantom footsteps and a voice. The witch layer attempted to shoot her with a silver bullet, but was slapped about and frightened out of the house. John Bell fell victim to repeated bouts of illness for which Kate claimed responsibility. While he lay sick in bed, twitching and jerking, the spirit cursed him continuously. Finally, the ordeals wore him down, and he told one son that the end was coming. He went to bed and never recovered. His family found him in a stupor on the morning of December 9th, 1820. A strange bottle was found in the medicine cabinet. When the liquid was administered to a cat, the animal went into convulsions and died. Kate exultantly declared that she had poisoned him with the liquid while he was asleep. Belle died the next morning, and Kate shrieked in triumph. The torments of Betsy began to diminish, encouraging her to announce her engagement to Gardner. That brought on renewed attacks from Kate. In despair, Betsy broke the engagement and married another man, Dick Powell. Kate announced to the Bell family that she would leave for 7 years and marked her pledge with a cannonball-like object that rolled down the chimney and burst like smoke. As promised, Kate returned 7 years later and plagued Mrs. Bell and 2 sons with scratchings and the pulling off of bed covers. They kept the return a secret, and the torments stopped after 2 weeks. Before Kate left a second time, she visited the home of John Jr. and pledged to return in 107 years in 1935, when she would bring bad tidings for Tennessee and the entire country. The year came and went without incident, but the area around the Bell farm is said to be haunted still. The Bells never understood why they were singled out for such an unearthly attack. It is not known what the real Kate Batts had to say about it. Theories have advanced that Betsy may have been a poltergeist agent. She was the right age, around puberty, and her strict Baptist upbringing may have caused repressed sexual guilt. She also may have had subconscious resentment towards her father. However, there is no evidence that she was unhappy or repressed. And while the spirit did plague Betsy the most, it roved all over Robertson County and meddled in everyone's affairs. Perhaps the intense resentment and hatred bottled up in the real Kate Batts created a thought form which took on a life of its own. Legend number 2. John Bell was a wealthy planter in North Carolina who hired a foul-tempered overseer. The overseer abused the slaves and some say had an eye for Bell's oldest daughter, Mary. Bell and the overseer had many clashes which escalated until Bell lost control and shot the overseer to death. At his trial, Bell pleaded self-defense and was acquitted. After that, however, the Bell fortunes began to turn sour. The crops failed, and he had to sell his slaves. Soon, he was broke. He sold his land and moved his family to Tennessee to start over again on a small piece of land near the home of Andrew Jackson. Strange things began to happen in the Tennessee home. The children awoke in their beds each morning to have found their hair tangled and their nightclothes snatched off. An old black woman told Bell his family was haunted by a witch, the haint or ghost of the dead supervisor. She offered to spend the night under the children's bed to find out for sure. In the middle of the night, the Bells were awakened by a horrible scream. They found the woman in a panic, claiming the haint had pinched her, stuck her with pins, snatched the kinks out of her hair, and whipped her. The terrified Bells told their neighbors, including Jackson, who did not believe in haints. As soon as he said so, he was struck by an invisible force which knocked his hat off his head and sent it flying. Mary, meanwhile, began to suffer nightmares in which a cold and heavy weight pressed the breath of life out of her chest. The haint appeared in her mirror and spoke to her. These phenomena continued as Mary grew older. The haint scared off all her boyfriends so that she received no marriage proposals. One night, the haint spoke to the Bells from the andiron in the fireplace, telling them that he was in love with Mary and wanted to marry her. The Bells refused. The next day, Mary began to droop about, and her condition worsened over time until she was so ill she could not get out of bed. For a month she lay in bed, not responding to the ministrations of a doctor. One night, as her mother held her hand, she sat up suddenly and said she saw the haint and thought she was going to love him. Her face lit up with happiness, and she died. On the day of her burial, a great black bird with a bell tied around its neck appeared in the sky over the funeral procession. The bell tolled the most mournful note ever heard. The bird continued to circle over the mourners until Mary's grave was covered, and then flew away, the sad tolls of the bell lingering in the air. Legend number 3. In the early 1800s, John Bell of North Carolina became engaged to a widow, Kate Batts. He soon discovered she had a nasty temper. He tried to break the engagement, but she refused to allow it. One day, she fell on his farm, hit her head in a bucket, and knocked herself unconscious. Belle thought she was dead, and he dragged her body into the root cellar and locked the door. She awoke the next night, however, and began moaning and calling to John for food and help. He ignored her pleas, and 2 days later, she died. John surreptitiously took her body away and left it on her own farm, where it was found by a neighbor. Happy to be rid of bats, Belle married another woman and moved to a farm near Adams, Tennessee, north of Nashville. His happiness was short-lived, for soon after their arrival, horrible hauntings began. A huge black bird with fiery eyes and a terrible stench dive-bombed him while he was plowing his field. At home, strange noises were heard, and his 3 sons, presumably from a previous marriage, were awakened by what sounded like a giant rat gnawing at their bedposts. The poltergeist phenomena were followed by a disembodied spirit whom the family called Kate Batts's witch, and who exhibited great hatred for Belle. One morning in 1820, the spirit announced that she'd had poisoned Belle during the night. He was in fact dead. The family was haunted by the Belle witch for 1 more year. Then, after a 7-year absence, the spirit returned again to torment the family with knockings, scratchings, and the like. Once again, the spirit left and swore to return. The Belle witch was believed to make her appearance again as late as the 1980s. An owner of part of what used to be the Belle farm claimed to see apparitions of a dark-haired woman floating across the fields and to have mysterious knocks sound at his door. The Belle witch is believed to haunt a nearby cave called Belle Witch Cave, where unearthly screams, phantom footsteps, and the sounds of chains dragging on the ground are reported to be heard.